Hi everyone, Andy here at Spymaster Gaming. Welcome back to the channel and a very warm welcome if it's your first time joining us. In today's video, I'm going to be presenting to you 5 alternative rank and flank systems to Warhammer the Old World. Now, at the time of this going live on YouTube, it is Saturday the 20th of January and Warhammer the Old World is available to purchase. Or rather, it's not, because Games Workshop supply has been exceeded by the demand and a lot of people have been left disappointed not being able to get their Bretonnians, Tomb Kings and even the core rules. So if you're one of those people, you may find this list interesting as something to take your mind off the fact you haven't been able to get what you wanted, and maybe a system that could become your main system because it's, quite interesting. Either or, just always remember there are always alternatives to Games Workshop, and some of them do quite innovative things, and that's what this list will be about, the systems which I think are unique and quite cool, and obviously something a bit different. They are numbered 1 to 5. I've not ranked them in any particular order, but I will discuss the differences between them and the Old World and why they are worthy of potentially a look in. So, kicking things off at number 5, we have one-page rules, Age of Fantasy Regiments. For those of you who've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know I cover one-page rules extensively, predominantly the Grimdark Future system, which is their version of Warhammer 40k. One-page rules is brilliant for new and old wargamers alike, as it is a simplified system, limited stat lines for models, and you can play a full game in under an hour and a half most times. The classic fantasy races that you all know and love are available in this system, and it's miniatures agnostic, so whatever models you have from any of the ranges, Games Workshop, any other manufacturers, you can use them for the lists in this game, and it's absolutely fine. The nice thing about it as well is that they have a army list builder that is free, and they have community books that you can build. So if you fancy creating your own faction, you can do so, and it can be uploaded for other people to use, which is pretty cool. And using their points calculator, it's always balanced, which is excellent, as that's a good thing that I look for in most of my games. The other thing to differentiate it from the Old World is that it's all free. The rules are all free. I'll put the link in the description below, so there's no reason why you shouldn't have a look at it. And the activations as well are different. So instead of the Old World where it's I go, you go, so I have to wait for my opponents to do everything and then I can react, it is I move a unit, my opponent moves a unit, and it keeps on going like that. So you're constantly involved in the game, and you can change the course of the game, not having to wait too long before you can do something game-changing. Really cool system. Highly recommend it. Check it out. Number 4 is Simons, or Come-Ons, or however you want to pronounce it. It's A Song of Ice and Fire, based on the works of George R.R. Martin, the creator of that book series, or as most people know it, Game of Thrones. It's been around for a few years now. The initial starter set was a Kickstarter launch, but it has gone from strength to strength, and most of the factions in the books are available now. The Lannisters, the Starks, the Greyjoys, the Martells, whatever flavour theme you want to play, they are available in this game. The models are pre-assembled in a variety of poses. They are on circular bases, and they slot into square movement trays, and it is a wonderful little system. The mechanics of each faction differ greatly. They all thematically operate very differently, and it is worth a look. It has a really strong community in the UK, I'm aware of, and as well as the US. So if you do want to get games in, those communities do exist, which is a really cool thing. It's positive as well, the fact that this game is not going anywhere. In fact, it's actually getting a spin-off game later this year, which is going to be a skirmish level game. So they are investing in it, and it's not going to go away, even though the Game of Thrones TV show has obviously been off air for a number of years now, and we only have House of the Dragon to keep on going. But they are committed to it, which is a really positive thing. Check it out. It's reasonably priced as well, which is always a positive. So yeah, let me know how you get on with it. At number 3 is a game called Conquest, The Last Argument of Kings by Parabellum Games, and this is a bit of an outlier from the rest of the games on this list, as it operates at a different scale, 35mm rather than the standard 28 to 32mm. The models are bigger, they are beautifully designed, And for a young company, having only been around for about 5 years now, they have done a wonderful job of fleshing out this world of Aya that they've created. It has all of the classic fantasy races, but with darker spins on them. So, for example, they're Dwegom, who you can see on screen at the moment. They are evolved dwarves that killed the old race of dwarves because they were superior, or they felt themselves superior. And they are bulkier, they are more mechanically minded, and just a bit scarier as well. And you have the Spires on screen at the moment, who are their version of elves. So rather than being the noble, graceful elves that we all know from classic fantasy, they are alien cloners, and they are freaky looking, and they make some monstrosities as well. So a pretty dark take on the elves there. Their models are all on plastic sprue, apart from the characters, which are resin, which is amazing for such a young company. And their sculpts getting more and more detailed, and they're really, really nice. The way that it plays, it's slightly different again from the old world in the sense that all the units have different classifications. They're either classed as light, medium, or heavy, and depending on the classification, uh, decides what turn it actually enters onto the table. So rather than deploying your whole army at the start, it deploys in waves based on that classification. So if you have a lot of light units, they'll be able to gain ground early on, but then they run the risk of being decimated by medium and heavy units from your opponent. So you have to balance it up that way as well. The units activate based on a draw deck of cards. Each unit has its own card that you put in a draw deck, and that governs what unit you activate, and it passes between you and your opponent again. So alternate activations. Really cool system. If you want to read about the lore and the factions, all of it's available for free on their website, which I've put in the description below. Check it out and let me know what you think of it. At number 2, we have a game called Oathmark by Joseph McCullough and published by Osprey Games. Joseph McCullough is a bit of a powerhouse at game design. He's done Frostgrave, he's done Rangers of Shadowdeep and Stargrave. He's just a game designing machine, a one-man army. He's very impressive, and the stuff he puts out is great. This is no exception. Oathmark is a bit of a different game from the rest of the games on this list, is that in the fact that it's not competitive in the slightest. It is a narrative-driven rank and flank game. The whole concept of it is that you design your kingdom, and the kingdom is comprised of territories, and each territory you choose allows you to take certain units in your army. As a campaign progresses, you may lose territories to your opponents, which will then impact your ability to take those units into your army list. So say, for example, you have, say, caves, which allow you to bring in giant spiders. If you lose those caves to your opponent, those spiders are off limit to you until you recapture that territory. So it means you have to build your army list on the fly, depending on what your kingdom is looking like during the game you're playing. Also, it does something slightly different in the sense that the factions that you use in your kingdom are not divided along racial lines. And what I mean by that is most of the games on this list, with the exception of A Song of Ice and Fire, as it's mostly humans in that universe, are all divided along racial lines. So Warhammer the Old World, orcs and goblins are their own faction, dwarves are their own faction. That doesn't happen in Oathmark. Your kingdom can be comprised of orcs and elves working alongside one another, or dwarves and humans forming an alliance. Whatever narrative you want to spin and why they are allies or why they are enemies, you can build that, and you can create a really unique force that none of your opponents are really going to have, because it will be uniquely composed of what you want. Really cool, really quite different. And what I like as well is that the different troops that you can use, they are all very similar in terms of the classifications, but they have the slight racial tweaks which you'd expect to find. So are different in a way. So, for example, elven archers are really good at shooting. Dwarven heavy infantry are really strong at doing the charges and hacking enemies to bits. And orcs are terrible at shooting, but they're quite good when they get up close and personal. So some variations, but not enough to confuse anyone. So you should know what your opponent is capable of putting out. The game launched during COVID, and despite that, it has gained quite a cult following, and it's going from strength to strength. There's a couple of expansions out now, which brought in the Undeaders faction and some more narrative stuff. Again, mini agnostic, so they do have an official line of miniatures from North Star, which I will put a link in the description below for you to have a look at. But feel free to use whatever you want. It's all on 25mm bases as well, which is really easy, rather than obviously the old world, which is 1,000,001 different base sizes depending on what you're fielding. So check it out and let me know what you think. And then finally, at number one is a game which came on the scene during the closing days of Warhammer Fantasy and took over from them when it faded from the market, and that is Kings of War by Mantic Games. It's currently in its third edition, 3.5 technically, as it has had a lot of updates, and they've put out a 3.5 edition. And they've built a world which is wonderful called Panathor. All of the classic fantasy races are there. They operate very similarly to one another, but they do have their racial tweaks, as you'd expect. But you can roughly guess what an opponent is fielding based on the army composition. And their models are getting stronger all the time in terms of the detail and the quality. So their ogres and halflings that they put out in the last year or so, really good scoops, really detailed, and again, they're getting better over time. And it's a well played system now. It has a rules committee that governs the actual creation of the rules, and they sort of play test it and make sure that it's being sort of monitored and constantly developing, which is pretty cool. Those are the 5 alternatives that I've got for you today. Do any of them interest you, or are you firmly in the Warhammer the Old World camp and are not going to look at anything else? Let me know in the comments down below. I probably will be covering a couple of them on the channel because they do interest me. Oathmark, for example, I think is a great game, and I want to do some coverage of that. But let me know what you think. Have you tried them already? Have they put you off? Is there any barriers that you think that I haven't mentioned to people trying these games that you might want to make people aware of? Let me know in the comments below. Let's have a discussion about it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Ta-ta.